Hello, my name is Janine Turner, and I am the founder of Constituting America. Welcome to our annual scholastic study. History holds the key to the future, or as Shakespeare put it, more brilliantly, of course, the past is prologue. This year's study is entitled The Genius of America, A Journey into Our Republic, a study on Alexis De Tocqueville's Democracy in America. Please join us for the reading. The exact published book that we are using is on our website. He plunges into the wilderness of the New World with his Bible, a hatchet, and newspapers. This essay is entitled The Main Causes Which Tend to Maintain a Democratic Republic in the United States, Volume 1, Part 2, Chapter 9, Subchapter 7, page 288 to 292. This essay was written by Tony Williams. In 1838, a young Abraham Lincoln addressed a young men's lyceum, debating society, in Springfield, Illinois, on the topic of the perpetuation of our political institutions, end quote. Lincoln stated that mob rule and demagoguery were great threats to American self-government. He asserted that the way to preserve American political institutions was to restore reason and reverence for the laws as a, quote, political religion, end quote, over the shifting and dangerous passions of human nature. Publishing his masterpiece, Democracy in America, at the same time Lincoln spoke, De Tocqueville offered his own reflections on, quote, the influence exerted by the Enlightenment and the habits of the Americans on the maintenance of their political institutions, end quote. In both cases, education and political habits were formed primarily through experience rather than theory. The American people, he observed, were eminently a very practical people. De Tocqueville thought American education did not produce great literature or scientific inventions. Instead, Americans adapted the technology, quote, marvelously to the needs of the country, end quote. They also sought education to learn, quote, the doctrines and the proofs of their religion, end quote. Finally, they gained familiarity with, quote, the principal features of the Constitution that governs, end quote, their country. The main measure of American education might be found, in de Tocqueville's view, in the 1,000 newspapers he says crisscrosses the Republic. Americans demonstrated a commitment to the, quote, utility of enlightenment, end quote, rather than a desire to reproduce the encyclopedia project of the French Enlightenment to classify all the world's knowledge, for example. Americans bring this practical education and knowledge even in the vast stretches of the Western frontier. De Tocqueville stated that the American plunges, quote, into the wilderness of the New World with his Bible, a hatchet, and newspapers, end quote. Thus they bring their version of enlightenment with them as they civilize what they considered a wilderness. But more than that, education cultivates the habits and mores of a self-governing people. De Tocqueville writes, quote, the instruction of the people serves powerfully to maintain a democratic republic, end quote. Those virtues of citizenship, however, are acquired not through reading great political tracts, but by the constant practice of self-government. De Tocqueville is astounded that Americans have an extremely strong sense of their rights. The American knows, quote, what his rights are and what means he will use to exercise them, end quote. The same could hardly have been said of peasants farming in Italy or serfs in imperial Russia. Americans also acquire an understanding of the laws from reading newspapers and participating in the work of self-government. With a written constitution and published laws, Americans were in a unique position of knowing the laws they lived under. De Tocqueville writes, quote, "He has made himself familiar with the mechanisms of the laws," end quote. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, Americans engaged in self-governance. Universal male suffrage meant that all white men could vote, which was truly exceptional in the first half of the 19th century. They voted in free elections, served on juries, held political office, served in local government jobs in their communities, and attended Democratic town meetings. Quote, "It is from participating in legislation that the American learns to know the laws, from governing that he instructs himself in the forms of government. The great work of society is accomplished daily before his eyes, and so to speak, in his hands," end quote. De Tocqueville noted that Americans carried, quote, "the habits of public life into private life," end quote. This was perhaps one of the keys to the health of American democracy. They had democratic habits and virtues that animated a robust civil society of self-governing citizens who could manage their own affairs without the intrusive hand of government. And self-government was rooted upon education forming the character of the American people. Today, Americans generally have a strong instinctual sense of their constitutional rights. While they may not always get the exact particulars correct, they cherish the right to speak their minds because they have free speech under the First Amendment. They also have a strong reaction against a police officer searching the trunks of their cars without probable cause or entering their homes without a warrant. They would want to speak with a lawyer if arrested and held at a police station. In this way, at least, the American spirit of liberty and self-government is alive and well. De Tocqueville noted this phenomenon almost 2 centuries ago in Democracy in America. He wrote, "An American, quote, will teach you what his rights are and what means he will use to exercise them," end quote. This essay was written by Tony Williams. Tony Williams is a senior teaching fellow at the Bill of Rights Institute, a Constituting America fellow, author of Washington and Hamilton, The Alliance That Forged America, and Hamilton, An American Biography.